G'day, welcome back. Today I'm starting a new series in some ways, kicking off with a video in my chess stats playlist, which I look at where I search the database and try to find some interesting statistics to do with chess. And the one I'm doing today is another Rook endgame one, and this is the sort of the next sort of classic Rook endgame. I've done the basic Rook endgames in a previous video, Philidors and Vancouver and all that sort of stuff. And now I'm doing a very other common type of Rook endgame that one meets a lot. It's where you both have 3 pawns on one side of the board and there is a passed pawn on the other side of the board, typically the A pawn. This is kind of called 3+1 versus 3 Rook endgame. And what I want to look at is, what are the actual winning percentages and winning formations, and it's become a bit of a rabbit hole as I kept on looking at it in terms of what I could look at. So anyway, it's a very, very interesting endgame. I've had it quite a few times in my games. I can't even remember what I was thinking when I played them and how I was trying to win or hold the draw. So this has been a study on my own part to try and understand the situation a bit better. So partly this was inspired by the recent video by Daniel King on his Power Play chess channel, where he did the famous Alekhine Capablanca game from the 1927 World Chess Championship, where Alekhine had the extra A pawn and was a very instructive and almost textbook style win with the extra pawn. So I'll probably show that, but in a later video. I just want to go over some of the sort of statistics of the of the position to start off with. So let's go to the capture screen, and I'll just we'll quickly go over what we're talking about. So there we go. There is the classic position. No surprises there. In this one, it's it's passed A pawn with the rook behind, and the attacker's rook behind and the defender's rook in front of the pawn. And this is a classic winning position. I think this is almost exactly the Alekhine Capablanca one. So I've just noted over to the side there the sort of factors we're actually thinking about, which actually affect the percentage of theoretical win rates, but also in practice win rates. The defending rook is behind or in front of the pawn, otherwise it's just can't stop the pawn. The attacking rook behind is best, in front is bad, beside can be sort of a middle case. And then the other factor is how far advanced the pawn is. The further advanced, the greater winning chances, and how distant it is. I put it in the A file, but it can be B, C, D file or whatever, right? And the closer it is to the king side, easier for the defender side to defend. And then what's the kingside pawn structure? This is a classic one, but you just look at the thing, how far advanced is it on both sides? Because often black is looking for counterplay by attacking or exchanging pawns on the king side. Are there any weaknesses? The base of the pawn chain, can that be attacked? And king access, the idea of how easily can the king go through that square, and how quickly can the king move around. And the final thing is king position. Well, the king positions there are safe, but there might be some other sort of positions, particularly when the pawn's on the 7th rank, you might just want the king hiding there in a very defensive type of position. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is run my little simulator. Excuse me. I've repurposed this one I've used for the bar and Centurini, and so we can see it. Basically, it moves this structure around. Oh, that's not very good. Let's get back over there. It puts this little structure on the board, and then I'm just showing some visualization of why certain rook positions are better. So this is the defender is in front. So you can see that as the pawn gets advanced to the 7th rank, that the rook gets more and more restricted and can't do anything, whereas the rook, which is behind, the attacking rook behind, defends everything, attacks everything, and obviously the king can march up, and often the classic way of winning here is king marches over there. And if you bring the pawn back, then the defending rook gets a little bit more active, can defend a few more squares, and the white or attacking rook gets less and less scope for motion. Yeah, you can see that. So it's actually got control, less and less control. And in fact, as you go way back here, we'll see it in a bit. We'll come back to this in this position, because the white rook is so restricted. It's actually quite difficult to make any progress. In fact, so let's have a look at that. So this is the defender in front. Now, if we look at the pawn is only on 8. Oh, and of course, just to wrap up, you can see obviously you can have the same positions in different files. But let's have a look. If the pawn is on A2, this is the worst possible pawn position, and the rook's got in front, and obviously that's a common theme. Get the rook in front of the pawn, stop it from advancing. Now I'm just going to press calculate if it works, which now runs away and comes back to 0. So this position is drawn, even though the defender is in front. We move it up 1 row. Let's do another calculate, just to get a feel for the different likelihoods. So that seems to be 0 as well. right? So that looks like it's also drawn. But go up to, say, the 5th rank, and I'll get engine do its magic. So this is winning. I mean, anything over +2 in a Rook endgame, I mean, obviously you give the engine a bit longer, it'll go to find mate, right? So you can see that the further advanced you get, and if we go way up the top, see what score it comes back with. 6 now, so it's seeing the win much more quickly, right? And so we can just go across to here. Let's say the 5th rank on the C file, is that still winning? It is. So I'm gonna, as I'm doing this, I realize I should actually do a heat map, and I'll do that. And so this video, surprised to learn, well, I'm going to do a few different sections. So that's fine. So that's the defender in front, and you can see the defender in front. He really has to stop the pawn before the 5th rank, for instance, to have any chance. Let's just go back to the 4th rank and see what the 4th rank thinks about it. Okay, that's still winning, right? So it has to hold it back to the 3rd rank. Right, so that's defender in front position, just to give a sense. Now, so let's just quit out of that and go to defender behind, and we'll see. Go across again. So in this case, the pawn has got to the 7th rank, but the defending rook is behind. And you can see that actually it's got much more scope. Defending rook, it can do checks, can stop the king across, can attack the f2 pawn, chain base, lots of things. Much better for the defending rook. Let's see what the computer thinks about it. It's actually an illegal position for white to move. Let me just move it back one. I'll move it there. Move it there. And do calculate. Come back one. So that's a drawn position, even on the 6th rank and then on the 7th rank as well. I believe it's also drawn as long as the black king was on g7 or h7. Right, so come back to like this position to calculate. Also drawn. So these positions are drawn. Basically, you get rook behind, you're drawn, you're laughing, right? That's what you really want. And then, of course, I'll do a heat map and see what happens as the pawn gets closer, but it just makes it even easier for the defending side. So that's the two sort of classic cases: rook in front, rook behind, with the mirror image for the attacking rook. So what we're going to do now is there's another position I set up where the pawn is beside. Now, obviously, with white to move, this is win because he checks and makes queen. So let's just go back to here, and you can see the difference is that the black rook has a lot of activity, but at least in this position, the white rook has some more scope. Yeah, it can often flash across to like the f6 square and defend the pawn chain and attack. So it's got a better off than being in front. So is it a win or is it a draw? This position most likely win, right? Go back one row to here, see what it says. Still a win, right? So you can see the difference that when you've got this position, rook behind, it's better to have your rook beside. So, but on the 5th rank, it looks like it's a draw, right? So what we're going to have a look at in the later videos is why can black draw this, but he can't draw it when it's there, yeah? So that's with the rook behind with the rook to the side. Now, the final position you might end up with is this one. Let's go back to a similar position, 5th rank. Let's see, this should be winning, and it is, but maybe if the pawn is further back, let's go back to there, see what we got. So that's a draw. Where the rook went. That's probably winning, right? So slightly better chances for white. And obviously he's got an unusual situation here where it would be better if his rook was behind, but his rook to the side, and it gives him some extra possibilities. So there we go. That's the sort of the combinations you're looking at in terms of the rook position and the winning chances. And so now I'm going to do the next step is, I might slip that heat map in, I've got that done in time, but otherwise I'm going to go to the CASA database and do a search of these games, how often they turned up in real life, and what results people actually got from playing those games. So just give me 1 second. Yeah, okay, so just a quick interlude. Basically what I have determined is that for this position, I mean, it obviously depends a lot upon different rook positions, all that sort of stuff, but, and king positions. If the defender's in front, this position, then a7, a6, a5, a4 are all winning for white. Now, if the defender's behind, none of them are winning. If it's the defender's behind and the white rook's to the side, then only a7 or a6 for the pawn location win. And then if the defender is in front, it's actually just as bad as with the white rook behind or the white rook beside, because once again, a7, a6, a5, a4 are all winning in this particular position. So just give you a sense that actually the who is defending from the front. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so let's go on to the stats side of this video. Now, the first step is to find these rook and pawn endgames. Now, I'm using Scoutfish, which I've used quite a few times, and the idea is, big game database. You use Scoutfish to filter out for the types of games you want, and then in this case the Rook and Pawn end games, and then I'm going to do some analysis on the results in those games. Now you can see I'm not sure I'm doing the best way, but I've looked at different ways of using Scoutfish to get the results I want. This is a typical thing. Streak. It's got to be this from the white side. There's a similar mapping for the black side. So king, rook, and 4 pawns versus king and 3 pawns is the material balance, and a streak. So then you have to have the material balance, and then in subsequent moves you have to have this pawn. See, from that to there is all the same thing. You need an A pawn, or pawn A7, pawn A6, pawn A5, all the way to A2, and then you need the king side pawn structure. So you'll need, where's this one end? Does that one end there maybe? This is a 5p2, that's a f pawn, so that's an f2 pawn, and black has an f4 pawn, f2 pawn, black has an f6 pawn. It's supposed to be a loop, so that's 2 and a 4, and that's 2 and a 5, and there's a second rank and a sixth rank, and then you need a g pawn, which I think is the next one, and then you need 2 g pawns and 2 h pawns, and then once again I'm making sure I have a few moves like that, and you've still got the same material balance. That means we're in one of these end games. And this is 1,000 games, actually. I'll redo the stats on it later. I was using a small later. It's just to demonstrate this is the sort of way you use Scoutfish. Obviously, I've automated the generation of this with a loop of some sort. Can't find my code down. But that's the idea. So you run it, and that comes back with a bunch of games. And then when you've got those bunch of games, then you can skim through them and work out win, loss, draw based on where the rooks were and where the pawns were. And what I did is put together a spreadsheet. Let me bring that up. Okay, the system just went down then, which is a bit annoying. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up with some of these numbers. We'll just have a quick look, and you can see that I have ranked the outcomes of these games we filtered for by the rank of the pawn. And then I've also done an assessment of what sort of an end game it is. Attacker behind, attacker in front, defender behind, attacker is on A, which means the defender would be in front, so the attacker would be in front. Defender behind, attacker is not on A, which would be attacker is to the side, and then a couple of random ones. And then defender in front or attacker is on A, so defender in front, attacker behind, right? And we'll just quickly, and then mixed. And I'll just give an idea. I was trying to do obviously the rank of the pawn is easy enough, but I was trying to just automatically filter things and just sort of, I can look at it more closely, I can come up with a better one, but this mixed one, for instance, I just show you this game, Bogolyubov, fine. Okay, here's the transition to the 3+1 versus 3 endgame. Black would go behind the pawn, that would be drawn pretty much, so that's fine. That's the sort of, in my coding, I was just looking for things like that. Does the rook go behind? Does the rook go beside? Does the rook go in front? This one, what the hell is it doing? What the hell is fine doing? And this is actually very weird because this position should be lost, but it ended up a draw. Anyway, I just wanted to show that game as an example of what mixed means, and basically you should ignore it for now because that doesn't fall into the way I'm looking at it. Okay, so let's have a look at the numbers we come up with. So I'm going to focus on 4 numbers here. Oh, first of all, by rank. 39, 44, 47, 59, 61, 79. I thought when you got the 7th rank it might drop off a bit, but basically the further advanced the pawn is, the greater the winning chances. 40% if you're just on the starting square, A2. 80% if you're on the A7 square. Okay, that's all good. Right, and then it's sort of some of the categories here. 85% if the attacker is behind. Right, so we've seen that's although you can see here this is only because it's more advanced pawn positions. This was 5 out of 8, so 3 of the missing gap of 35 to 41 is actually from that one. I don't know why 2 of the missing gap should be that one. Could be different pawn king positions. 85%, it's just a general guide. If the attacker is in front, therefore the defender is most likely behind, 41%. Okay, we've seen this sort of makes sense as well, particularly positions like that. And then if we go to this one here, some of these other numbers we changed. So this is defender in front, attacker is on A. That means that defender in front, attacker will be behind. So that's 80%. And then this one, defender in front, attacker on A. So that's to the side, 49%. So, and then these 2 lines here, which are the ones I've done a chart of. Let's have a look at the chart. So the way to interpret it, defender behind, attacker in front. That's the blue line, percent win rate. And then defender behind, attacker to the side is the orange line. So you can see that actually if the defending rook has got behind the pawn, then the best thing for the attacker to do, not in all cases, but in many cases, is to go to the side. It gives better winning chances. Obviously, you then have to work out the tactics or the how you move the rook forwards as you're shepherding the pawn forwards, because you're not supporting it the whole way down. Anyway, but this is 50, 67%. It's still worse than 85% if your attacker is purely behind. Okay, cool. So that's good. I think I will wrap up there on today's video. And I think I just gave you a very good idea of the percentage chances and the sort of factors which affect the winning chances in this 3+1 versus 3 endgame, where the rooks are, how far the pawns are advanced. And what I'm going to do in my follow-up videos is a look at more detail at more like the edge cases videos that are more detail for each of those types of categories of endgames. There's about 4 of them, right? What are the attacking and defensive resources in each case? Okay, great. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching.